first started as a monologue, and then in the past year I added all the other characters. At first it was just Joaquin's monologue, like in a bar. So it could go through more changes, because even in the last time I performed it in March, I made some rewrites between then and now. So maybe I will change that. Yes?
What inspired the playwright, and what encouraging words would you have to other people who have not yet come out to their family about being transgender?
Okay, so the question, two questions. What inspired the playwright, and then what advice do I have?
Yes.
Okay. Well, a lot of things inspired me. One was in the program, there's a little history of the one of the inspirations for this piece, which I was performing my other one-woman show, which is pretty autobiographical about my coming out as a lesbian and a Latina, dealing with cultural and sexual identity. And I was performing that show at the True Colors Conference, which is a youth conference in Connecticut, annual. It's a wonderful organization, and I did a performance of that, and then I had a writing workshop with teens afterward. And I was amazed at how many teens in my workshop were transgender and were talking about the discrimination they faced and the abuse, really, in the school, in their community, in their homes, kids who have been disowned, kicked out, were homeless. I mean, it was just heartbreaking. And that gave me a lot of insight also into just, wow, transgender youth. But around that same time, or even before that, actually, I had a very dear friend of mine, a childhood friend, who came out as a trans man. And I had known him since we were kids, and we both came out as lesbians too, when we were in our 20s. So I knew him as an adult, as a lesbian, and we bonded. So when he came out as trans, I'm ashamed to say that I was freaking out in my head. I never told him how I felt until much later, until I was writing this play, actually. And I said, I need your help, and I need to confess. But I'm afraid that I was kind of like Esperanza, in the sister who's like freaking out. I felt like that, and I was like, why am I freaking out? Why? I can't believe I was an activist. I mean, I marched. I had trans friends. We marched in every fucking parade, in the 90s. How could I? Suddenly freak out when my dear friend was coming out. And I had to confront my own fears and prejudices and ignorance. A lot of it was ignorance. I felt like, oh shit, man, he's abandoning the lesbian cause, He's gonna have all this privilege, which was a lot of bullshit, really. The wonderful thing I discovered, and this was through talking to him, and he also showed me the Barbara Walters and the Barbara Walters special on transgender kids. And I started to do more research, and then I also did a workshop at True Colors, and all these things started to gel for me, and I realized my friend is still my friend. He's the same lovable, funny, warm person he's always been. And his coming out, he really needed our support, my support, his family's, and I had to get over my shit, and just be there for him, be a real friend, and stop just giving into my ignorance. So that became the initial inspiration. Around that time, Chica Luna and Sister Outsider Entertainment were putting together a show about queer Latinas, and it was a series of monologues written and performed by Latinas about queer Latinas, about the queer Latina experience. So I said, hey, to my dear friend, who I think is in the audience, I'm so happy to see. Okay, you don't want me to shout you out? All right. Anyway, my friend, who was, founder of Chica Luna and Sister Outsider, she said, oh yeah, you want to do a monologue? I said, yes, I think I want to write a transgender character. And I'm not sure how she received that at first, but she was very encouraging along the way. It was really because of all these, my friend and the True Colors experience, and that was the initial seed. And then from there, I did a lot more research, and then I applied for a grant, and I got a grant, thankfully, from the Children's Theater Foundation of America, a wonderful group who, I have to be honest with you, I didn't think they were going to support me. Because, the material is a little edgy, and they're the Children's Theater Foundation of America. God bless them, coño. So from that point, then it just was there, and so that was really the inspiration. I really owe it to my friend and the kids at True Colors for opening my eyes and educating me. Yes?
Out of all the characters, thank you. Out of all the characters that you do in this, what's your favorite?
That's kind of, I think Cece. Yeah, is that show? Oh, God. I hope I don't show favoritism.
Well, my
I think
favorite two
Cece.
are the mother
Oh, the
and
mother.
the daughter.
The mother was hard for me because, my mother was nothing like that.
No?
My mother was, fire. Firestorm. My mother was more like Cece, I think. What the fuck? So she didn't say the F word. But yeah, my mother would have been, yeah. I don't know, but the mother was a challenge for me. But I like playing all the characters because, even though this story is not about my friend, it's not about me, it's not about any one person, they're fictional characters, but they're composites of people I've known and loved, and so there's a lot of my own family in here, There's a lot of myself in there too. And when I came out as a lesbian, I had, some tough reactions. My parents, were pretty homophobic. Took them a while, so I kind of use that. So all the characters are kind of dear to me and near to me, but I think Cece is. I don't know, my director keeps telling me she needs her own show. I know. Any other questions? Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't answer your second part. I was going off on my tangent. So the advice I have, well, thank God there is much more of a support system now than there was when my friend and I were growing up and coming out, even as lesbians in Connecticut. We grew up in rural Connecticut, and that was no joke. So it was really hard. There was no gay center in our school or our town, I remember even in college, a kid being ostracized because she wanted to start a gay club. But now there are places. If you live in New York City, I say go to the Lesbian and Gay Bisexual Transgender Community Center on 13th Street, 208 West 13th Street. I even know the number by heart, 212-620-7310. I think the website is gaycenter.com, but I did a lot of work there many years ago with wonderful groups of people, and all sorts of folks meet there, so that's one resource. There's also this group, I just started learning about Niagara, which is listed in the program. But I think the most important thing when people are coming out as trans or gay or anything, and they don't have a supportive family at first, a biological family, that we have to learn that family extends beyond our biology. I see many friends in the audience tonight, and I consider them my family, because they're people who love me and support me, and I love and support them. So I think you have to try to find that support system, find like-minded individuals, find groups, and get involved. You don't have to go through this alone. There are folks out there. And if anybody's from Connecticut, and you need, Connecticut, there's a lesbian and gay center. You know about this, I don't need to tell you. Anyway, but there are organizations in Connecticut too that help. But I think that's the first step, is to really try to hook up with people. And in time, I think families sometimes will come around. It takes communication, education. There's a wonderful group called PFLAG, Parents of Lesbian and Gays, and they do a lot of great work. They have literature. I'm not sure if they must have a website. But that's another resource to maybe, slip the family member a pamphlet or something and say, hey, check this out. They may be reluctant at first. I know if my mother had, if I tried handing my mother some PFLAG, she would have ripped it out of my face. But, when I came out as a lesbian, my mother was just like, but it took her time, but over time, she got over herself. And I think part of that was because she saw that I was really happy and I was just living my life honestly. And I think when our family can see that we're just being true to ourselves and we're happy, hopefully that's all they want for us, right? So, yes, sir.
I just have one. We're programming the festival. What is it try to be more expansive in the programming. And so one of the things last night we had a group of readers, and there was a trans person and a trans man in that, and there were in the films there were that. But we were looking at our programming, and we have this piece, and there's a play reading about a trans woman. But both, I know the person that wrote is a gay man, and you're a lesbian. So we're wondering, like, do you get any reactions being a lesbian writing or a trans person, or?
No, I've had really supportive audiences. I've only done the show a few times, but the audiences have been wonderful, and people have come up to me afterward and said that they could relate to the experience. Because again, I think I'm presenting a theme which is universal, that even if you're not trans in the audience, I think you can still identify with a lot of the issues that are dealt with here. And it's all about acceptance, and I think this play, I wrote it more for the transphobic people out there in the audience, hoping that my characters will be a mirror to them. They can see themselves and maybe reflect and think, gee, maybe I got to get over myself, or maybe I need to come to a place of better understanding. So I think that's what people relate to. I've never had anybody say, oh, how can you write about this? Or I've had people ask me if I am trans, I'm surprised when I say I'm not. But, yes.
I think it's really great that you're making this a work in progress, and that you're willing to sort of change it as you go on. And one of my comments about it is that I love all your characters. What I have observed, I'm very involved in the trans community, and one of the things I've seen that's fractionated the lesbian community is partners where one partner is transitioning, and then the other partner is suddenly losing her identity as a lesbian. And I think that this is something that comes up, that I see comes up over and over and over again. And I think it's wonderful about the way you portray your characters, and I'm wondering if that maybe you gear it towards your audience, and then if you're doing it to a lesbian audience or something, that might be a theme that you might want to incorporate somehow, because I've seen this happen over and over and over again.
That's interesting, because I talked with somebody about that after, I think, the Hartford stage show. Yeah, there was a couple came up to me, exactly as you're describing it. The lesbian was saying, I'm starting not to know who I am. I thought so.
And it really does, it breaks a lot of couples up, because they don't want to be, identified now as a straight woman.
Right.
And so, it's it's a very hard identity for some women to deal with.
I think that's where Cece leaves off, when she says, I've never been attracted to men. Like this, that is maybe the beginning of that. Yeah. Maybe Cece does need her own show. Yes.
What's the hardest part of the play for you to perform, either technically or emotionally?
Remembering my lines. Bad playwright. Bad actress. The playwright slaps the actress's hand. What's the hardest part? I think the hardest part for me are the transitions. Going from character to character. I tried to work hard to make them more seamless. I think if I look back and see when I did the show in March at Hartford Stage, I felt good about the show, but when I watched the video, I felt good in the moment, and then I made the mistake of watching the video, and I'm like, oh my God! But it was good for me to see that, because I saw that also at Hartford Stage, the stage is huge, 3 times as wide as this. So the distance between these two playing areas was much greater, and I was like taking my time, going for, and no, it's got to be smoother. So I really tried to work on that for this performance, and it's still something I want to make more seamless. But that's definitely the hardest part, transitioning physically and vocally, because I was in rehearsal the other day. All of a sudden, Papi and Mommy got switched up. I don't know, I was just bopping. And my director was like, whoa, 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 whoa.
Am I gonna get in your be crazy, baby. Turn to another man. All the wrong, new ones.